So right here, who were the Gentiles of the new covenant? This will be a quick breakdown. Romans 10 and 12. For there is no difference between a Jew, meaning what? A Judean, and Greek. Then you have to go to the Apocrypha, the 1611 King James Bible, to understand, well, why in Romans are they talking about there is no difference between a quote-unquote Jew or Judean and a Greek? 2 Maccabees 6 and 6. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient fast, or to profess himself to be a Jew, meaning what? A Judean. So during that time period, it was, unlawful to claim, your heritage, because they wanted the Israelites to practice a lot of the pagan rites and so forth. Right here, we're going to be looking at this book, In Judea Trembles Under Rome, by Rudolph R. Windsor. Page 19. We'll start right here. Antiochus decreed that unclean animals should be used as a sacrifices. Under harsh punishment, he prohibited the keeping of the Sabbath, circumcision, and the eating of clean food. All these laws distinguish the Judeans from the other nations. Circumcision would easily be detected because the Greek performed their athletic games naked. They had no virtue for chastity or modesty. The idol god Jupiter Zeus was placed on the altar in Jerusalem, and unclean sacrifices were made in his honor. Heinrich Gritz tells us in his monumental book, Death threatened all those who openly confess Judaism, and they dared not call themselves Judeans. Openly, the Judeans could call themselves only Greeks. This is why you have to read the Apocrypha, 2 Maccabees 6 and 6. So now we're at 2 Maccabees chapter 6. We're going to start at verse 1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Judeans to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of the Most High, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, as we just read previously in the book, Judea Trembles Under Rome, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympus. And that is in Garism of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. Verse 3, the coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles. Now, there are two types of Gentiles. Gentiles, or heathens of the other nations, and Israelite, Gentile foreigners. But in reference or context to verse 4, this is talking about the heathens or the Gentiles, non-Israelites, right? Who dealt with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar was also filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself to be a Jew. So right here, we're going to be reading the book Facts Are Facts by Benjamin H. Freedman. Now, this is a so-called Jew. Now, we have to understand that most of the world considers the so-called Jews of today to be the biblical people of the book. But as I sift through this book and many other sources, all claiming the same thing, one commonality, that those people are not the biblical people or aboriginal or indigenous people during the time period of Judea. So on the back of the book, it says, inscribed upon the cross when Jesus or Yashar'el was crucified were the Latin words, Jesus Nazareth Rex Idurium, if I'm pronouncing that right. Pontius Pilate was the author of that famous inscription. Latin was Pontius Pilate's mother tongue. Authorities competent to translate and pass upon the correct translation to English agree that is Jesus, the Nazarene ruler of the Judeans. There is no disagreement among them of that. The word Jew did not occur anywhere in the English language until the 18th century. I repeat, the word Jew did not occur anywhere in the English language until the 18th century. Jesus, or who we call Yahweh, or some people call him Yeshua, was a Judean. Now, when we read the Bible, we have to read it from a historical context. We can't keep using a lot of the modern words that we see today. And a lot of these definitions and words were changed around the 18th century. That's when the Caucasians, or who we call Edomites, came into power. They started changing words and definitions. So if you're not aware of this information, you will be bamboozled. But yes, they have changed a lot of words and definitions, and a lot of people cannot grasp or understand that you have to use certain words or know the people of that time, because those people that claim to be so-called Jews or Judeans are not. Right here it also states the modern day Jews were historically Khazars or Khazars, a Mongolian Nordic tribe who roamed northern Europe. And of course, we're using Jewish sources and many other sources, but right here it states the Jewish Encyclopedia, volume 4, and it has Khazars or Khazars, and that area today is known as Ukraine. Like the scripture says, there's nothing new under the sun, and we'll get into more information. Now, in the book Facts Are Facts by Benjamin H. Freedman, he's going to state the same thing I've stated on my page for over a decade with many Jewish sources. So right here it states, European Jews, who form 92% of the world's population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe who lived deep in the heart of Asia, and they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. They set up a large Khazar kingdom of 800,000 square miles. At the time, Russia did not exist. Keyword, Russia did not exist, nor did many other European countries. The Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe, so big and so powerful that when other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would lend them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. They were phallic worshippers. Keyword, they were phallic worshippers, which is filthy, and I do not want to go into the details of that now.
Reason, I don't know why, just kind of sit around all day and draw pictures of dicks. What? Draw pictures of dicks.
Dicks? Like a man dick?
Yeah, like a man dick. I just sit there for hours on end drawing dicks. I don't know what it was. I couldn't touch the pen to a piece of paper without it drawing the shape of a penis.
Reading on, but that was their religion, as it was also the religion of many other pagans and barbarians elsewhere in the world. The Khazar king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, or what is known today as Judaism, which is really Talmudism. By spinning a top and calling out eeny, meeny, miny, mo, he picked out so-called Judaism, and that became the state religion. He sent down the Talmudic schools of Pumbedita, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Shura, and brought up thousands of rabbis and opened up synagogues and schools, and his people became what we call Jews. He also goes on to state there wasn't one of them who had any ancestors who ever put a toe in the Holy Land, not only in the Old Testament history, but back to the beginning of time, not one of them. And yet they come to the Christians and ask us to support their armed insurrections in Palestine by saying, you want to help repatriate God's chosen people to their promised land, their ancestral home, don't you? It's your Christian duty. We gave you one of our boys as your Lord and Savior. You now go to church on Sunday and you kneel and you worship a Jew, and we're Jews. but they are pagan Khazars who were converted just the same as the Irish were converted. It is ridiculous to call them people of the Holy Land as it would be to call the 54 million Chinese Muslims Arabs. Muhammad only died in 620 AD, and since then, 54 million Chinese have accepted Islam as their religious belief. Now imagine in China, 2,000 miles away from Arabia and Mecca and Muhammad's birthplace. Imagine if the 54 million Chinese decided to call themselves Arabs. You would say they were lunatics. Anyone who believes that those 54 million Chinese are Arabs must be crazy. All they did was adopt a religious faith, a belief that had its origins in Mecca and Arabia, the same as the Irish. When the Irish became Christians, nobody dumped them in the ocean and imported to the Holy Land a new crop of inhabitants. They hadn't become a different people. They were the same people, but they had accepted Christianity as a religious faith. These Khazars, these pagans, these Asiatics, these Turco-Finns were a Mongoloid race who were forced out of Asia into Eastern Europe because their king took the Talmudic faith. They had no choice in the matter, just the same as in Spain. If the king was Catholic, everyone had to be a Catholic. If not, you had to get out of Spain. So the Khazars became what we call today Jews. Now imagine how silly it was for the great Christian countries of the world to say, we're going to use our power and prestige to repatriate God's chosen people to their ancestral homeland, their promised land. Could there be a bigger lie than that? Because they control the newspapers, the magazines, the radio, television, book publishing businesses, and because they have the ministers in the pulpit and politicians on the soapboxes talking the same language. It is not too surprising that you believe that lie. And this is a Jewish man stating this, not me. Now, this is one of the greatest lies of history. It is the foundation of all the misery that has befallen the world. Because when Christ said in Revelations 2 and 9 and 3 and 9, okay, those who say they are Judeans and are not, even in the book, it says the Khazars, okay? So right here we have the Khazars. In this period of glory for the autonomous Jewish community in Babylonia, the religion of the Jews, or Judeans, and their way of life attracted many persons. Numerous tribes in the Arabian Peninsula and in the various lands of the Near and Middle East adopted Judaism. The most famous of these were the Khazars. The land of the Khazars in southern Russia extended from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea as far as Crimea. The Khazars were a semi-nomadic pagan tribe, keyword pagan tribe, whose chief was the Kagan. At the beginning of the 8th century, the Khazars became very strong by virtue of their domination of the trade route between the Byzantine Empire and the Far East. Now we're back in the book, Facts Are Facts, and right here it states, it is an incontestable fact that the word Jew did not come into existence until the year 1775. Prior to 1775, the word Jew did not exist in any language. The word Jew was introduced into the English for the first time in the 18th century, and so forth. Now right here it also states, there is not a person in the whole English-speaking world today who regards a Jew as a Judean in the literal sense of the word. That was the correct and only meaning in the 18th century. And this is why I've stated many times that this is when they became or came into power, the Caucasian or the Edomite race of people. Okay? They didn't rule in the old world. So-called black people ruled with a mighty fist during the Dark Ages and beyond that as well. The generally accepted secondary meaning of the word Jew today, with practically no exceptions, is made up of 4 almost universally believed theories. These four theories are that a so-called or self-styled Jew is, number one, a person who today professes the form of religious worship known as Judaism. Number two, a person who claims to belong to a racial group associated with the ancient Semites. Number three, a person directly the descendant of an ancient nation which thrived in Palestine in biblical history, known as Judea before it was known as Palestine. Number four, a person blessed by divine intentional design with certain superior cultural characteristics denied to other racial, religious, or national groups, all rolled into one. Now, of course, I can't read Greek, but when you translate it, it states, I know thy tribulations and your poverty, but thou art rich, and is slandered by those who say they are Jews. Now, the word Jew shouldn't be in there because remember, the word Jew didn't appear till 1775. Prior to 1775, the word Jew did not exist in any language. So the correct term should be Judean. Those who say they are Judeans, or Idios, if I'm pronouncing that right, and are not, but are the synagogue of Hasatan. Because the Jew is a new term, a modern term for those converts, the people who claim to be ancient Israelites but are not. As the author of this book, Benjamin H. Freedman, stated, they added secondary terms. So this is why you see Jew or Judean, but really it should be just Judean, not a Jew. Now we go to Hebrews 8:8. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Okay, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The house of Christians? No. The house of Baptists? No. The house of Pentecost? No. Those are man-made religions. 1 Kings 9:7. I will cut off Israel out the land, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. And we know that today to be what? The Negroes. Or the nigger. Okay, you can do it with one or two G's. It's still pronounced the same. It's pronounced me and then ger. That's how you pronounce it. Nigger. Two G's, one G. The so-called black people. Okay, Deuteronomy 28:37, the curse. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb. Israel shall become a proverb, a byword, and a byword among all nations, whether the Lord or Yahweh shall lead thee. Okay, and that applies to today, calling us out of our name, our heritage. 1 Corinthians 12:2, ye know that ye were Gentiles, meaning what? The house of Israel, carried away into these dumb idols. You know, most people believe that's talking about the other nations, but no, based upon the story and the context and the plot of the Bible, it's talking about the house of Israel. Why do I say this? You go to 2 Kings 17:5-23. Israel was carried away by who? The king of the Assyrians, right? Why? They sinned against the Most High Yahweh. Verse 8, they walked in the statutes of the heathen. Verse 10, set them up as images in groves. Verse 12, for they served idols like Baal or Ashtaroth, okay? So this was the dumb idols. That's why sometimes the Israelites were referred to as Gentiles, because they accepted many pagan or ways of the heathens around them. Okay. 1 Kings 11:31. I will rend, meaning what? Split the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to thee. The division, right? James 1:1. To the 12 tribes. It's not talking about Christianity. Okay, which are scattered abroad, greetings. Okay, in Matthew 15:24, This is JC or Yahushua speaking. I am not sent but into the lost sheep of the house of Israel, meaning what? The Gentiles. Okay? And I can go further on and expound upon what Paul was talking about when he became a apostle to the Gentiles, meaning what? The Israelite foreigners that were scattered. This is a continuity of the scriptures, especially upon the precepts. Here a little, there a little. And of course, there are more scriptures to attest who were the Gentiles of the New Covenant or New Testament. This was not talking about the Hindu people or the Buddhists or the Egyptians or the Philistines or the Amorites. Okay, those were other nations and they served other gods. So why would Christ come and try to die allegedly for these people who don't have the same belief system, or that's not his people? Makes no sense. But I digress. Peace.